A very good evening everyone. Welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. Today is 7th June 2025 and today we have some very important and interesting topics for the discussion. So one by one we'll try to discuss all these important topics in a very detailed manner. So before going into the discussion, so please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button as well. So the first very important topic with which we're going to start the session is about the G7 summit. So when we talk about the G7 summit, so this is a group of 7 advanced and industrially well developed countries. However, India is not part of the G7 summit, and that you should understand. There are 7 well developed or advanced industrial economies which forms part of the G7 grouping, and India is not part of it. But from 2019 onwards, India has been regularly invited as a guest country as part of the G7 summit. But why this is in news? It is because Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been invited to the 52nd G7 summit that is going to take place at a place called Kiss in Canada. And in fact, this G7 summit, the 52nd G7 summit, is going to be held from June 15 to 17, 2025, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been invited as a guest to attend the G7 summit, even though India, as I've already told you, that very few countries are actually asked to attend the G7 summit, and India is one among them. However, another very significant aspect of it is that Canada is going to host this year's G7 summit, and we all knew that India and Canada relations are not at a good level. So therefore, Canada inviting India to part of the G7 summit is certainly a good news to hear about, because there is a possibility that the bilateral relations between India and Canada could be improved, and this could even lead to a trade agreement between India and Canada as well, and Canada acting upon the Khalistani extremists which are located and which are also doing the anti-India activities in Canada that have been threatening India's internal security. So therefore, in that particular context, it is very important. Now, India has attended the G7 as a special invitee since 2019. So since 2019, whatever G7 summit has takes place in different parts of the world within the G7 member countries, so India was asked to attend the G7 summit as a guest country. Now, one significant aspect of this invitation is that recently India became the 4th largest economy. So India surpassed Japan to become the 4th largest. India surpassed Japan to become the 4th largest economy in the world in terms of GDP, and in terms of the purchasing power parity, India is already the 3rd largest economy. I hope you have understood this. Now we have some important and interesting details about the G7 summit. Remember, these are a very important information, because IBRD is already asked by UPSC this year. So therefore, there is a probability that UPSC has been asking about such international organizations. So UPSC not just asked about the IBRD, it has even asked about the G20 in previous examinations, and even the UPSC even asked about the BIMSTEC grouping and even the BRICS as well. So keeping this in mind, so there is a chance that UPSC might ask G7 as well, because India has been invited to the G7 summit regularly. So it is the privilege that not all countries would get. So therefore, G7 is also very important, that when it was formed, what are the member countries of G7 grouping and what G7 would do. Now, in fact, G7 is an intergovernmental group of 7 richest democracies. As I have already told you, that these are the 7 countries: Canada, Germany, Italy, France, UK, US and Japan. So these 7 countries are called as the richest democracies and industrialized advanced countries. And in fact, the G7 member countries discuss major economic and geopolitical challenges that the world has been confronted with. And in fact, a G7 summit would also launch several initiatives for the development of infrastructure. So that could be an alternative to the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. However, a G7 launched alternative to BRI is called as Partnership for Growth and Infrastructure Development, which is also called as PGI. However, so when we talk about the G7 in a much more detailed way, G7 is not a treaty-based body and it has no permanent secretariat as of now. And also understand the G20 grouping is also not having any permanent secretariat. And G20 is even not based on any treaty among the member countries. So therefore, you have to understand the difference between G7 and G20, and you should also understand the member countries of both G7 and G20. All the member countries of G7 are also the member countries of the G20 grouping as well. The G7 grouping has been formed in the year 1975. And in fact, it is a group of 6 countries when it was formed. The countries are France, Germany, Italy, Japan, UK and USA. So these countries together formed the G6 grouping in the year 1975. However, in 1976, Canada became part of the G7 grouping, making it G7. However, later Russia also became part of the G7 grouping and it became G8. But in 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea, Russia was annexed from the G8 grouping and again it became G7 grouping. However, the current member countries of the G7 grouping including USA, UK, France, Germany, Canada, Japan and Italy. So these are 7 richest democracies. However, European Union regularly participates as an invitee or a non-member of G7 grouping. And all other relevant information has also been given here. So kindly pause the video and you can go through this information. Now what are the key functions of the G7 grouping? Because G7 as an informal grouping performs certain functions. So the first very important function of the G7 grouping is that it actually provides a platform for the world's advanced economies or rich democracies to stabilize the markets, reduce global inflation and also ensure the fiscal discipline as well, because these things could have important financial implications for the world's economy. And similarly, it drives action on global crises such as climate change, artificial intelligence regulation, cybersecurity threats and public health emergencies, which are a key concern for the world. And in fact, these countries together promote the liberal democratic values, gender equality, sustainable development across different member countries all along the world. And similarly, the G7 grouping also acts as a key forum for aligning the donor priorities and even signaling the coordinated global policy shifts to international institutions. These are some of the key functions of the G7 grouping that it performs. However, India, right from 2019, regularly being part of the G7 grouping. India is not part of the G7 grouping, but India is invited to the meetings of G7. So in 2019, France invited as a guest country to the G7 meeting. So followed by that, in 2021 also UK invited India as a guest country, and Germany in the year 2022, Japan in 23 and Italy in 24, and now Canada in 25 again invited India as a guest country. So therefore it is very significant, and there is also a possibility that this G7 summit is held or hosted by which countries in which year. There is a probability of such questions being asked in your examinations, so kindly go through this as well. So next important topic is Starlink gets license to start services in India. Now in this particular topic we'll understand what is Starlink and how it is going to help or benefit India, or how it is going to be a game changer when it comes to providing affordable or low cost internet access to remote and rural areas in India. Now what is the context? The context is that recently Department of Telecommunication has granted license to Elon Musk's Starlink. So Starlink is actually a low cost or affordable internet service provider to the remote and rural areas, and it is owned by Elon Musk. However, Elon Musk has been regularly trying to introduce Starlink services in India as well. However, a Department of Telecommunication has recently granted license to Elon Musk Starlink to begin satellite internet services all across India, particularly targeting the remote and rural areas where the network is not properly available. And in fact, Starlink becomes the third company after European Union or EU Telsat, OneWeb and Geo Satellite Communications. And previously Geo Satellite Communications and even EU Telsat OneWeb have already received approval from the Department of Telecommunication to provide such services, and Starlink became the third company to get the approval from the Department of Telecommunications. Now what is Starlink? So we'll try to understand this as well. And when we talk about the Starlink, it is a satellite based broadband internet system, and that has been developed by Elon Musk's SpaceX. And in fact, this satellite based broadband would provide internet access to remote and rural areas in different parts of India. As of now, it is already providing internet services all across the world, or majority part of the world. And in fact, the Starlink would aims to provide high-speed, low latency internet globally, especially in remote and rural areas. And in India, there are several places where the network access is not properly available. In those areas, a Starlink would be a game changer in providing internet access, because internet access and penetration is also very important as part of the e-governance initiatives of the government. So therefore this would be considered as a game changer. However, the parent company of Starlink is a SpaceX, and it is founded by Elon Musk in the year 2002. Now we'll understand how Starlink will work. And Starlink actually consisting of a constellation of low Earth orbit satellites. A constellation means a group of satellites which orbit in the low Earth orbit, which is just a 550 kilometer altitude. And in fact, the ground stations would transmit the data to the satellites, which relayed back to the user terminals on Earth using the radio signals. So you should have to remember that they use the radio signals, and they will be placed under the low Earth orbit around 550 kilometers of altitude. And in fact, the satellites are even equipped with the laser links for inter-satellite communication for forming the global internet mesh as well. So this is how Starlink would actually work. Now what is the significance of Starlink for India? So we'll try to understand the significance of Starlink for India. As I have already told you that there are several remote and rural areas where internet is not properly available, and Starlink would be a game changer when it comes to providing internet access to those remote rural areas, because it enhances digital inclusion in underserved and remote rural areas. And in fact, it even reduces the dependence on the fiber and mobile network in those disaster prone or geographically challenging terrains where it is not financially viable to deploy large scale fiber or mobile network infrastructure. So therefore, it can be considered as a true game changer. And it even boosts the competition in India, because there would be a number of players, they would come in and they would start competing with these big players. So when there is a huge competition will also benefit the consumers by reducing the costs. So therefore, the internet would be more and more affordable for the common man, particularly in Tier 2 and Tier 3 towns. And apart from that, India will be positioned as a key market in the global satellite internet race as well. So these are the number of advantages that we have through a Starlink. So we can expect both prelims and mains question from such topics. So please kindly go through all these different points again. I hope you have understood this, and even if you have any doubt regarding this, so you can just comment your doubts in the comment section. And this is how Starlink would actually work, as I have already explained to you. Now, what is a Bharatiya Bhasha Anubhag? Recently, Home Minister Amit Shah launched Bharatiya Bhasha Anubhag. Now in this topic, so we'll understand what exactly is Bharatiya Bhasha Anubhag and why it has been launched, what are its objectives, and how it is going to change the language landscape in governance. Now, why it is in news? It is in news because Union Finance Minister Shri Amit Shah launched Bharatiya Bhasha Anubhag. So this is called as Bharatiya Bhasha Anubhag. And in fact, it is also known as Indian Languages section to promote governance in the Indian languages. So by this we can understand that the Bharatiya Bhasha Anubhag would promote governance in Indian languages. And similarly, this initiative aims to reduce dependence on the foreign languages in administration, and it would also strengthen the linguistic diversity in India through the translation infrastructure and even the policy reforms as well. So in India, the major problem when it comes to the governance is a huge dominance of one or two languages, a huge dominance by either Hindi or English. Translations into other regional languages is not available, and that could be considered as a major hindrance in the governance, because common people don't understand the languages like English and Hindi. For example, those people who are living in the southern part of India and northeastern part of India, they most probably not able to understand Hindi language. So therefore, it is very important that we need to promote different languages, including the regional languages as well. So in order to promote the usage of regional languages in the governance and administration, Union Home Minister has launched Bharatiya Bhasha Anubhag. I hope you have understood the context in a brief way. Now, what is the objective and how Indian languages will be promoted in the governance and administration, so that it will result in a greater understanding of the policies and a greater participation of citizens, and that will also help in ensuring transparency and accountability in the administration. So this Bharatiya Bhasha Anubhag is a newly launched initiative, and as we have already discussed, that this Bharatiya Bhasha Anubhag initiative will institutionalize the usage of Indian languages in the governance. And in fact, as we have already discussed, that the administration or the governance is heavily dominated by English and Hindi. So therefore, a Bharatiya Bhasha Anubhag will institutionalize the use of Indian languages in governance, thereby reflecting government's commitment to language policy in the governance. And it has been announced by Amit Shah, Union Home Minister, and in fact, The overall objective is to liberate the administration from the foreign language dominance, particularly English. Now, more than Hindi, English is heavily dominates the administration and the governance. So therefore, Bharatiya Bhasha Anubhag would liberate the administration from the foreign language dominance. And in fact, it even emphasizes on importance of the multilingual administration in India. For example, when administration is carried out in a state like Tamil Nadu or Karnataka, it is important to promote the administration or carry out the administration in the local languages that people can easily understand and people can easily associate themselves with the administration. And that is the objective of the Bharatiya Bhasha Anubhag. And in fact, Union Home Minister also emphasized on the significance of thinking, analyzing and even decision making in mother tongues. So to fully realize the total potential of a country, and he also highlighted the principle of unity in diversity or the linguistic diversity. So in India, particularly in 8th schedule of the Indian Constitution, we all knew that there are around 22 languages which are part of the 8th schedule. So apart from these 22 languages, there are a number of languages in different parts of India would speak. Right. So however, the administration is mostly dominated by the foreign language and Hindi. So therefore, there is a need to institutionalize the regional languages in the administration. There is a need to liberate administration from the influence of the foreign language as well. This initiative would aim at strengthening the local languages, and it is seen as a key to restoring India's historic cultural prominence and even promoting India's culture through language as well. So I hope you have understood this. Now, how it is going to enhance the inclusivity through the translation. So translation essentially means that translating the policy decisions, translating the laws, everything into the regional languages, so that the people in these different regions across the country would be able to understand the policies easily. So this Bharatiya Bhasha Anubhag will support the translation of state communications into the official local languages, including Tamil and other essential and important languages. And ultimately, so this will promote the usage of regional or local languages in the governance and administration. And the Bharatiya Bhasha Anubhag will also ensure that the regional languages finds a place in the central discourse and replace enhancing a linguistic diversity in India. In India, we can actually see a huge linguistic diversity where one or two languages should not dominate the entire country. And in this context, it is very, very important that the regional languages have to be identified and adequate recognition has to be provided, and important laws, policies, Supreme Court judgments have to be translated into the local languages so that the people can easily understand them. This move actually aims to bridge the linguistic gaps and even encouraging more inclusive and participatory administration that would respect the mother tongue of all citizens all across India. So I hope you have understood about the Bharatiya Bhasha Anubhag that has been launched by Union Finance Minister Shri Amit Shah. So next important topic is amoebic meningoencephalitis, right? So this is also called as AME, right? So this has been in news frequently, and there is a probability of such questions are being asked in your examination. Right. So therefore, the context is that recently State Public Health Laboratory of Kerala. So it is considered as one of the apex referral laboratories in Kerala. So it has recently developed its own molecular diagnostic test. So it has developed these molecular diagnostic test kits to identify 5 common species of a free living amoeba. And the free living amoeba can be considered as toxic to humans because this can cause amoebic meningoencephalitis. So this is a disease which is associated with the human brain. So when it infects human brain, so it starts it actually infects human brain, and that would have a very high mortality rate. So mortality rate of around 95% also. Now what is this amoebic meningoencephalitis? So it is important for us to understand this. So it is an infection of the brain, as I have already told you, and the brain as well as the membranes which covers the brain, and the membranes which actually cover the brains are called as meninges. So therefore this amoeba is called as a free living amoeba, which is a microscopic, a single celled organism, and this amoeba is found only in water. And in fact it is a very rare to infect the human beings, but once it infects the human beings, it could be considered as a serious disease with the mortality rate of around 95%. So you can imagine how serious this is, because when a person is infected with this amoebic meningoencephalitis, then there is a probability that out of 100 people who are infected with this, 95 people would die. So it even infects mainly young and active people. However, when we talk about the classification of this amoeba, so it is classified into two different types. One is a primary amoebic meningoencephalitis, and which is also called as PAM, and secondly it is a granulomatous amoebic encephalitis, GAE. So this primary amoebic meningoencephalitis is caused by Naegleria fowleri, while this granulomatous amoebic encephalitis is typically associated with Actamoeba species or Balmuthia madrillaris. Right, so these are different names which are being given to these toxic amoebic species, which may cause the brain related infection or diseases. So this PAM, which is called as primary amoebic meningoencephalitis, tends to progressively or rapidly, and it progresses rapidly and is often considered as fatal within weeks, whereas GAE develops more slowly but is equally deadly if not treated properly. However, once the disease has been identified in human beings, there is a need for the administration of antibodies to make sure that people are out of risk. However, in Kerala we have seen such cases are growing as well. Now what is amoebic meningoencephalitis? We have understood now how it actually transmits. So we should also understand the transmission of this particular disease as well. So the amoeba that actually causes the infection mainly occurs in shallow surface waters and incorrectly maintained swimming pools, hot tubs, spas, particularly in the warm climates or the tropical climates. Swimming in salt water has not been associated with this disease. Now you should have to remember this. For example, there might be a statement that swimming in salt water is also causes the disease. No, swimming in salt water is generally not associated with this disease of amoebic meningoencephalitis. So infection occurs when infected water enters the nose. So you can see, so if infected water enters the nose, then it even spreads to the human brain. So this can happen while diving, jumping and swimming in the fresh water, and then the amoeba invades the brain and meninges through the nose. Right, so this is how the amoebic meningoencephalitis would actually transmits into human beings. and it is also called as the brain eating amoebic species. So I hope you have understood this. And the brain eating amoeba is also called as Naegleria fowleri, and you should have to remember this because it is important for your prelims examination. So I hope you have understood this, and that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. So if you like our lecture, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.